Welcome back to Kaulignation, your one-stop shop for all things Kaulig Racing, Dingernation, SVGNation, and more. That's Ryan. I'm Sean. Our multiple choice question for this video is a really simple one, a yes or no. Do you think Dodge will convince Trackhouse to join their stable? That's been the rumor out there the last few weeks. Comment down below yes or no. Also, don't forget to check out our channel sponsor, Lynn, over at SVGNation on Facebook. Great place to go if you're an SVG fan. And check out our other Facebook pages, Kaulignation, Dingernation, SVGNation, and Kaulig Racing. Well, Ryan, we know that Ram is back next year, even though we still don't have a announcement on who will drive Rams. And the assumption is that when they finally move to Cup, that it would be Dodge. Obviously, there's some other possibilities, but when you look at the North American car market, Dodge makes the most sense. You can't rejoin NASCAR and not have some sort of main team. You can't join with a couple of lower-end teams and expect that you're ever going to get anywhere. So the question becomes, does Dodge have enough pennies in the piggy bank to lure Trackhouse Racing over to them? You know, obviously, whatever Rickware Racing ends up being named, I think they become a prime candidate as well. There's probably a couple other teams that you can go, you know, maybe we can get, I don't know what JTG is called anymore. I forget. Is it High something Motorsports?
They're Hayek. It's a weird name, but yeah, it's Hayek.
Yeah, Hayek Motors. So that could be another possibility. We know that the guy in charge is desperate for 2027. We know that he's been told that 2027 feels very lofty and unlikely, but that's his goal. He wants 2027, and if not, then by 2028. So there we are. Like, where do you think this ends up? Do you think Dodge, with some factory backing, and he did say, we'll see if he's willing to put his money where his mouth is. He did say they're not only willing to sponsor cars, but they're willing to go out and find partners for the team as well. So maybe they're not willing to do the whole, what Ray Abraham Racing was when they first got in there with the 9 and 19 and sponsor the cars for the entire damn season. But clearly they're willing to offer some level of support. How big of a catch would it be to go out and get Trackhouse? Obviously, Ross Chastain's established. SVG, well, obviously older, is still young in terms of his NASCAR life, and Zilish is young. Would they, would a step back, because that's what it would be, even with those guys, you're going to take a step back at least in year one and probably in year two. Doesn't mean they can't win on road courses or super speedways. I think those are both options still, but your overall program will take a step back. What's the likelihood of this? Can they net the big fish? And I know people will say there are teams bigger than Trackhouse, and there are many of them. But for Dodge, this is probably the highest ceiling they could get, in my opinion.
Yeah, without question. I think, Chevrolet has Hendrick, Ford has Penske, Toyota obviously has Joe Gibbs Racing. Those are the stalwart organizations, and they have been linked to their manufacturer for a decade plus now, for all three of those organizations. You're not ripping any one of those three away from their cornerstone to move over to Dodge. I know Penske at one point in history had that relationship, but they're so entrenched with Ford now I don't see that happening. So when you look at who's left, what organizations are left, and who has the ability to provide quality race cars, compete on a week-to-week basis, I think you're looking at organizations like Roush Fenway Keselowski, a Trackhouse, maybe a Legacy Motor Club. They've made a big step forward this year with Toyota, but they still got a long ways to go. Those are kind of your middle-tier teams with multiple cars, and I think what we've seen with Roush Fenway Keselowski going to 3 cars, Legacy trying to get that third car going, that they have actually trying to position themselves to get that opportunity with Dodge. Because if you're going to, as a manufacturer, come into the sport, you need more than 2 cars. You probably need 6. And we've seen this in the past with Toyota when they were kind of stuck at 3 or 4 cars. It took them a while. So I think the Toyotas, it was the blueprint, and Dodge is following in that footstep, and they recognize that they need a bigger organization. So, looking at the calculus of that, I do think Trackhouse is the right answer. They are at best the second Chevy team. You could even argue they might even be the third Chevy team, with Spire being so closely connected to Hendrick these days. I think it would make a lot of sense for Trackhouse to make the jump. You want to be the number one team backed by your manufacturer. You're going to get tens of millions of dollars. And yes, the initial jump is going to be a bit of a struggle. But I also think Dodge is taking the right course on this. They're obviously bringing in the trucks next year. They've talked about making the leap to Cup in 27. I really think 28 would make the most sense, just so they can get their foundation in place. I actually read today, Sean, that the president of the Dodge Ram portion of Stellantis has been tapped to oversee the entire racing operation, and Dodge is bringing back their street racing program, which is kind of like their factory works racing team, and that's also going to be part of their NASCAR racing team. So they are definitely putting foundation there for that.
He did a great interview with Kevin Harvick recently that's definitely worth watching if you sit down. The passion is 100% there, and I'm with you. I think 2028 is the smarter plan. I got to tell you, man, I think they're gung-ho on 2027. It's just a question of, can they, rack up enough money to be able to do it? He was turned off a bit at the idea of just starting a team, because we know NASCAR holds the rights to a few more charters if they want to use them. They'd still have to pay for those charters. And it didn't sound like he was overly interested in that. It sounds like he wants to get some existing teams. You mentioned Legacy, which is one that I didn't even think of. The problem with Legacy is their sponsorship situation's pretty good, Shouldn't be, but somehow it is. And but the Legacy itself, Dodge, its legacy in NASCAR, Richard Petty being the figurehead over there.
Absolutely.
There's no one name that is more aligned with Dodge than and them. And frankly, once RPM left Dodge, it was the beginning of the end for Dodge and NASCAR. Penske was it after that. So I do wonder if they sit there and go, okay, can we entice Jimmy Johnson and company and Trackhouse and company and get those two teams, and those are our tentpole teams. I still think it's probably more likely that they end up with whatever happens with Rick Ware and a Trackhouse. But man, the idea of seeing those WeatherTech Red Bull cars as Dodges. I grew up as an NHRA fan. I was a fan of the Dodge boys, Scott Jeffron, Darrell Alderman back in the day. That's what those paint schemes remind me of, and to see those guys running Dodges, I know this is a Kaulignation channel, but the Trackhouse lover in me might build up even more.
Yeah, I would really be excited for Trackhouse, and I really do think, with today's world of spec, right, with this next gen or Gen 7 car, that the growing pains won't be nearly as significant. Trackhouse is going to bring a lot of data with them from their 4, 5, 6 years of next gen, that they can really use to bring that Dodge to life. Obviously, there's a huge undertaking when it comes to suspension and all of those sorts of things that separate a brand from another brand. And we even heard from Mike Cook that was the biggest change for him going from Ford to Chevy, was how the front geometry or even the rear geometry differed. So there would be a learning curve, but I do think in today's world of the spec racing car, that it's not going to be as painful of a transition as it was when Toyota came in. So and with the quality of drivers, Conor Zilich, SVG, Ross Chastain, I really do think they'd be able to hit the ground running and be pretty competitive right out of the gate. It wouldn't be competing for championships, but I have no doubt they would be competing for playoffs right out of the start.
We'll see what ends up happening here. Could Trackhouse be destined for Dodge? We'll see you in the next video.